Good evening and welcome to another series. This is part two of our series for Constitution Nights, a program sponsored by Grenada Credit Unions. I am happy to reintroduce my colleague and a newly found friend, Mr. James Bristol. He is a legal counsel and he has a wealth of knowledge on the Constitution. So this evening we will be focusing on human rights, land acquisition, the Police Act, and something I'm interested in hearing about is the Grandance Estate Limited versus the Governor General case. I'm really interested in that. Monday we had an excellent conversation about the Constitution. We talked about the meaning of the Constitution, the composition of the Constitution, and we touched on Parliament and tax powers. And I think tonight we're going to have another excellent broadcast. So I want to welcome to his microphone, because I don't think we're sharing mics tonight, Mr. James Bristol. Thank you for being here with me to discuss this very important topic for Constitution Night series. Welcome.
Evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me again. And I'm not sure if I have a wealth of knowledge, but I'll try my best. And I hasten to repeat that I'm not an expert on the Constitution. I'm not an expert on anything. I just try my best. And it seemed that tonight we're scheduled to discuss the Bill of Rights, the fundamental rights and freedoms set out in Chapter 1 of the Constitution. And in fact, on Monday, we had a different area to discuss, but everybody was really gunning to discuss these rights, which I can understand because they're there for a purpose. And if I could quote from a text which I read, and I didn't attribute the authorship in error, but it was just a text in a case or something. Anyway, that human rights are the basic and fundamental rights to which every person, for the simple reason of being human, is entitled. These rights are inalienable. In other words, you can't agree to give away those rights. A person has them forever, and they cannot be taken away. The Bill of Rights in our Constitution, the section dealing with the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, is arguably the part of the Constitution that has the greatest impact on life in most countries. This Bill of Rights is a cornerstone of democracy in any given country. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. So it's very powerful what the Bill of Rights stands for and what it enshrines. And there are several fundamental rights which are set out therein, and from the right to fundamental rights and freedoms, the right to life, the right to personal liberty, protection from slavery and forced labor, protection from inhuman treatment, from deprivation of property, from arbitrary search or entry, to secure protection of the law, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, freedom of movement, protection from discrimination. And then we had what we discussed, the derogation of those rights, where the rights need not be respected, where you have a state of emergency, and we talked about that last time. So those are the rights. Now, what I would like to suggest, because I know there are many people listening, viewing, who have questions, and I prefer to be interactive, and I will try to answer those questions and give some examples on any given section of the fundamental rights and freedoms. I don't know if we have anybody on yet, and if we don't have anybody with a question just yet, I can give some tidbits and examples of rights and freedoms which, in my view, are continually, almost on a daily basis, transgressed by the government or by the state, and which for some reason, and one in particular, well, there are two that strike me, that no lawyer has actually taken up by way of a test case in the court. I was on the way to doing it within a case, but the case on another point was stopped, and therefore this point on a particular fundamental right and freedom was not adjudicated upon. I included it just to have the court rule on it, and that is the right to Section 3, deprivation of personal liberty. No person shall be deprived of his personal liberty save as may be authorized by law in any of the following cases. If you prison sentence, if you're arrested on reasonable suspicion of an offense, those sorts of things. Okay? Generally, that's what we encounter on a daily basis. We're trying to be practical. There are other immigration. If if foreigners coming in, they could be detained and deported, etc., pursuant to the law. The very one that strikes me here is Section 2, Section 3, subsection 2 says, and this is important because this happens almost on a daily basis in Grenada, and I think it's a power. It's a limitation on the right to detain people, which is related to a power in the Police Act, and which power in the Police Act is being abused. And I'll just read the section in the Constitution which talks about the limitation on an arrested person who's been arrested on the suspicion of having committed an offense. Any person who is arrested or detained shall be informed as soon as reasonably practicable in a language that he understands of the reasons for his arrest and detention. Generally speaking, I think that's, in my experience, that's being adhered to. 3, any person who is arrested or detained, A, for the purpose of bringing him before a court in execution of the order of the court, or, and this is the one, upon reasonable suspicion of his having committed or being about to commit a criminal offense under the laws of Grenada. So generally, people are arrested on reasonable suspicion of having committed an offense, right? That's the general what happens. So if somebody's arrested on reasonable suspicion and who is not released, so they take you in South St. George or Central or wherever, shall be brought, and these are the key words, without undue delay before a court. Mark that. Section 23 of the Police Act, which is what the police like to use. And I'm going to get 23 of the Police Act so I read it properly, page 38. Section 23 of the Police Act says this. Section 22 of the Police Act, 22 subsection 3. It shall be lawful for any police officer to detain for questioning for a period not exceeding 48 hours any person whom he or she believes upon reasonable suspicion to have committed an offense. No. The Constitution doesn't speak to 48 hours or any hours. It says without undue delay. You see the difference? Okay? What the Police Act has done is it is saying that up to 48 hours in essence is not undue delay. But undue delay always depends on the circumstances. What is undue delay for one particular arrest may not be undue delay for another. So to set a limit, in my opinion, you're trying to override the broad wording of the Constitution, which says without undue delay, but you're saying no, we in the Police Act say 48 hours we can hold you. Now, if the Police Act said we can hold you, we'll bring you without undue delay, that's fine. But undue delay could be 1 hour, could be 2, could be 3, could be 72. Because it all depends on the circumstances. So what the police do, they pick you up on Friday and give you a weekend in the cell. And they do that all the time.
Do you think that's despite the do you think that is spiteful?
I think it's been deployed very often to get at people, yes.
Okay.
That's my experience. So,
And then again, I guess it depends on the circumstance. It depends on who's involved as well. It might be that.
well, yeah, whatever. But the fact is, it's being abused, and no one has challenged it. I'll give an example of where laws. Don't forget, we said last time the Constitution is the supreme law. Every law has to bend to it. Okay, and in my opinion, this is where the Police Act should be bending to that. But no one's challenged it. I'll give you an example dealing with the acquisition of property. Now, Section 12 of the Constitution provides for the protection of your property. Now, this is to show you how judges think and how flexible wording in a constitution is not to be overridden by specific provisions where there is like a discretion without undue delay, where the circumstances dictate. Under the Section 12 of the Constitution, no, not Section 12, Section 6. Section 6, sorry. No property of any description shall be compulsory acquired, etc., etc. It must be for public purpose, but very importantly on this point, I don't want to read the whole thing, just on this point, except where provision is made by law applicable to that taking of possession or acquisition, and that requires prompt payment of full compensation. So the government can acquire property for public purpose pursuant to a law that provides for prompt payment of full compensation. Okay? Now, the Land Acquisition Act is the act which permits the acquisition of property. And it has a payment, an assessment of the value to be paid to the person whose land has been acquired. But it says, so you acquire my property in 2000, it's now 2023. The value is the value at the date of the acquisition. But you must have interest from the time they took your property on your money that you should have had to payment. The Land Acquisition Act says the interest shall be, I think it's 5 or 6%, right? I think it's 5%. And what our Court of Appeal has said is that you can't fix the percentage because the percentage rates vary from time to time. I remember we were borrowing money in the bank at 16% one time, and it went down 12, 11, 12, 13, 7, and it came right down to 4%. So you can't fix it because that will not be full compensation. Full compensation is determined by the circumstances that exist at the time. But what the fixed rate of a percentage rate is doing is taking away the variation factor because of the circumstances existing at the time. And they struck it down as unconstitutional. So similarly, the Police Act is saying 48 hours, whereas the Constitution says without undue delay. If you draw a parallel between them, you're saying, no, you're putting a rigid thing on this where the Constitution is flexible. And that is the parallel learning that I would use if I were challenging this Police Act, Section 22, subsection 3.
You know, I know you just talked about land acquisition. I have a question. Under what circumstance, I mean, maybe this is straightforward, but under what circumstance can the government acquire one's property? Because I know we talked about that on Monday as well, ownership, and under what circumstance and what is the procedure? I mean,
well, the Land Acquisition Act in Grenada provides for, in accordance with the Constitution, prompt payment of full compensation, subject to the interest thing, which has been struck down. And it says that property may be acquired for a public purpose. So the first thing is, in exercising the power of acquisition, the government has to identify a true and valid public purpose. They can't just make it up, but it must be a public purpose. So it could be for a school, it could be for a playground, a community center, it could be even a hotel, because the hotels, for example, has been ruled throughout the Caribbean that hotels are vital to the economy, and acquiring, let's say, a defunct hotel, so that some new investor could come in and build a hotel on that site or take it over and make it into something that benefits the economy. That's a public purpose.
Right, and I recently saw something where the government, maybe it was a post or something, where the government they want to construct a new hospital. So it would fall, that would fall under that as well. Okay.
Absolutely. The airport, the Morris Bishop Airport, when that was all acquired, that land, and that was for public purpose.
And I guess they would pay off the owners and
Well, that's another issue.
well, I like that issue. I find
Well,
that's a good issue to explain. I mean,
Yeah.
I probably have a piece of land that I want to say, hey, I know we into agriculture. We want to build a performing arts center, for example. I'd like to sell this piece of land to the government. How do I go about doing that? Can that work?
You can sell property to the government, and if they wanted it for public purpose, it saves them acquiring it and going through all that process, which is a long, and it costs money to go through the process. So if the parties can meet and have a contractual arrangement, I think that's better, because the land acquisition process, there's certain procedural steps which have to be taken, and which, if they're not taken, the acquisition is invalid. You need to have publication in the gazettes into 2 editions, not twice in the same edition, 2 editions. Then you have to put a notice on the property and so forth. And if you don't follow any of those, the acquisition will be null and void, will be set aside by the court if it's challenged. And there are other safeguards. But you have to follow the procedure in the Land Acquisition Act. And then payment. Well, as I said on Monday, I mean, right now at the airport here, there are several people who have yet to be paid for land that was acquired for the airport. And they're struggling, they're fighting. And it takes money and patience. And a lot of people who are now elderly, I've never seen the money to which they are entitled. Shameful.
I want to encourage our viewers online to share the live one and to also ask us your questions. Send us your question online and we'll address it. Today we're speaking on human rights, land acquisition, and the Police Act. So if you have any questions pertaining to that, please send us your questions and we will get to them. And we have a live audience. We want to thank the live audience for joining us this evening. And you too can also ask questions pertaining to those 3 issues.
All right. I have a question on the Possessory Titles Act. Can the attorney explain what that is all about?
Well, I'm glad you raised that. And it's amazing that this is probably, in my opinion, the most controversial legislation to be passed in recent years in Grenada, and no one has said a word. The Possessory Titles Act is a law that allows someone who claims that he or she has been in possession of land which wasn't theirs for 12 years to apply to the court and get the court to give them a title. Fine. That's fine. That's what the law says. However, let me just explain to you about property ownership, land in particular. Land, let's deal with land, that's what we're talking about. If you have a bit of land and someone squats on it for a period of at least 12 years, open possession, treating it as their own, that person can go to the court. Sorry, when you attempt to get back your land and you sue that person in court, that person, by way of his defense or her defense, can say, well, I've been there for more than 12 years, and under the relevant law, it's called the Limitation of Actions Act, your title, you have lost your title. And if the court is satisfied on the evidence adduced by both parties, that is the true owner and the squatter, and the court is satisfied that the squatter has been there for the requisite period of 12 years, then the true owner's title is lost. Okay? Now, that's fair enough, because what has happened there is that both parties are before the court. The law allows it, and both parties are before the court. The true owner to say, well, he hasn't been there for this period of time, and the squatter to say he has. So that is what you call the recognition of what you call the fair trial rights in Section 8.8 of the Constitution, that says any dispute must be determined by an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. Okay? And you're entitled to a fair hearing within a reasonable time. That's your fair trial rights. That's in every constitution in the world. So the owner has been given a fair hearing before the judge, and the squatter has been given a fair hearing. Okay? In the Possessory Titles Act, the squatter goes to court on his own. The owner is not part of the proceedings. And this is where the problem lies. So let us, people in these small islands, they travel abroad to seek their fortune. They're off the States, Europe, wherever. They send back money to buy the bit of land. They paid for it properly, it's theirs. When they're ready to come home now, or they come down on holiday, they come for carnival and they go up and look for the land. They see a man living there, they say, well, the court tell me that is mine. He knows nothing about it. Mr. William Joseph went away to do his law degree. He left his land here, right? Nice. He just run out to do this thing and come back. When he come back, his land's gone, because there's nothing in the Possessory Titles Act that says the owner must be served with the claim being made by the squatter and come to court and defend. There's nothing. And that is a denial of the fair trial rights.
It's frightening too.
It is scary. And if you look at the newspapers and the government gazettes, you realize how farcical it is, right? Because people are claiming, some of them don't even live in Grenada, claiming, how you could claim you're squatting on a piece of land and you don't live there? Mm-hmm. 2, they're claiming acres in some instances. 17 acres I saw once. And I went, what? Okay. How can you squat on 17 acres? Because the squat means you have to occupy and show signs of occupation as though it's yours. How are you going to show occupation over 17 acres of land? It's almost impossible. Unless you put up a big fence over a whole land, or it's grazing land and you have many cattle or something like that. Or it might be a banana field or cocoa, and you plant in that, and you can demonstrate some acts that show that you were actually using it as your own.
Someone is asking on the live, can the possessory title law be repealed?
Parliament can repeal any law. The problem is, I am aware from that certain people in the legal profession and the previous Attorney General, and I am aware, I think that I don't think that this administration, I don't think, is too happy with the Possessory Titles Act. I don't think anybody in their right minds could be happy with it. But the question is, what can we do to right that wrong before it gets out of control? Because somebody's going to sue the government when they come back home and their land's not there. Somebody's going to sue them. You know, I did a case in St. Lucia, and this is how I learned about when St. Lucia went changed the land system. Now they don't, hey, everybody have a deed, a piece of paper. They went into a different system, and they had to look at the whole country and give each piece of land a number, like a serial number. Like in a car, it's a chassis number. So every bit of land had a chassis number. And that chassis number had an owner. But they had to do it. So what they had to do, and they had a tribunal, people would come and say, yes, it's mine, or no, it's mine, and they'll adjudicate, and sometimes no one will come. So what they had to do is set up a compensation scheme. So people who did not come and who were not given a say would be compensated for the loss of the land. We don't have that in the Possessory Titles Act. We have nothing. And, I own bits of land around, and I have access to the gazettes because I have a subscription. It's forced me every week to scan the gazettes to see if my land is being taken, because no one is supposed to notify me. Every week, I'm shaking, and if I know I have them electronically, and if I'm away, I said my staff, email me every week the gazettes. And I sure enough, I found some. I found one close by to a bit of land. I knew the other landowner nearby. I called him. I said, look, I'm going to send you this thing to see if it's bothering you or bothering me, And there's another one in St. Andrew. I had to send it to the owner of that particular estate. I said, it looks like part of your estate going. Come on. The owner is in England. The owner don't get gazette anyway if he's in Grenada. So what about this advertising a gazette? Advertising a gazette, people read more Facebook and what was the next one? Instagram and TikTok than gazette. People don't study gazette. So how could that could even approximate to proper notice to somebody that their land is in jeopardy?
It's unfair. It seems unfair, and I think it's. Would you say that it's also hinging on the human rights?
No, it's a property. It's the taking of property that is not pursuant to a law, Section 6, that provides for the prompt payment of full compensation according to Section 6, because it provides for no compensation. And secondly, it's a denial of the fair trial rights when that decision is being made in the court, because the only party present, in fact, no party present. You have to swear affidavit. You get some man and two people swear to affidavit. Everybody swear affidavit. Who tests the affidavit? Who visits the land from the government side to say, yes, we visited, we saw the nothing. There's no check. They just give away people land. And the thing is, what happens is, people who get these orders from the court go to the bank, and according to the law, it's a valid title, and borrow on it. So they borrow, they build a house. The owner could never get that back.
Wow. Very frightening.
So,
I think we have another question.
I believe it was in St. John. There was a situation that involved the Possessory Title Act, and the rightful owners, quote unquote, lost their property. Is it a case that this, at some point in time in the future, could be challenged if we find that it was unjust of a decision that was made to take or steal the property from the rightful owner and giving it to somebody who was, I believe, living on the piece of property with permission from the owners?
No. If you're living on property with permission from the owner, you're not the owner.
Correct.
The only person who could complain is the owner. Okay?
I think in that case, the legitimate owners died.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
He's not the owner.
Okay.
Unless that person himself had been there for 12 years before these people brought their claim. And even then, he would still have to be a party to the proceedings to satisfy the provisions of the Constitution. Because let me explain to you about land ownership. Land ownership is all to do with possession. Is who has the better possessory title. In other words, you have two trespassers, two squatters. The first squatter has better rights to the second squatter. All right? But the owner, the true owner with the title deed, has the best rights. So that's why they say possession is 9/10 of the law. Okay? So a second squatter, while he may be claiming against a true owner, the first squatter could say, but I have already got 12 years against a true owner, and you can't move me out of here. All right? So it's all to do with possession. Land, it's about possession.
And yeah, and is it 12 years? Is it 12 years? Is that the length of time?
Yeah, the limitation period is 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
We have a question on the live. Is the possessory law, is the possessory title law unconstitutional? And if so, what redress is available to the original owner?
In my opinion, it's highly, wholly, completely unconstitutional in that it contravenes Section 6, not being a law that provides for prompt payment of full compensation. It also contravenes Section 8(8) of the Constitution, because the true owner or the person entitled possession is not given a fair trial. It's not given a trial at all, because they're excluded from the process. Because don't forget, in Grenada, even if you put a notice in the Gazette and you see it, you don't know a plan so-and-so. The plan is not even in the Gazette, you know. Land in Labary, there's no plan in the Gazette. Land in Grenada doesn't have a serial number. It has a named owner. So to give proper notice, you must name the owner and then identify the piece of land belonging to that owner. Okay? So the named owner could come to court. But without the named owner's name being published as the owner of the land, which is subject to the application under the Possessory Titles Act, how would he or she know that that's their land? That is why I say I have to go and monitor this thing weekly to see land in close to where I own. And that's not right. So yes, it's, in my view, challengeable. Very much so.
Thank you. Just reminding our viewers to share the live, and of course you can post your questions in the chat, in the live chat, and our live studio audience, you can also share your questions with us and we'll respond to them accordingly.
Yeah, so talking about moving on to a different area and the freedom of movement. Under Section 12, no person shall be deprived of his freedom of movement. That is to say, the right to move freely throughout Grenada. Grenada in the Constitution is Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. To reside in part of Grenada, the right to enter Grenada, or the right to leave Grenada, and immunity from expulsion from Grenada. I want people to understand, Grenada is Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The country Grenada comprises of these three islands and the outlying islands within the territorial waters. So when these people, for political mileage, talk about Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, don't try to make them people feel nice. Right? It's ridiculous. Not that you shouldn't do it, but I mean, they're doing it for a different meaning. They're not sincere. Now, let's get back to this. Understanding that Grenada consists of all of these islands, you have a freedom to move, except nothing contained in or done under the authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with that freedom of movement. Restriction, that means restrictions on the movement of residents of Grenada of any person's right to leave Grenada that's required in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, in the interest of defense, through an order of court where, you know, bail, you get, not bail, where you're detained, there's bail will have conditions, etc. Any person who's not a citizen of Grenada, and so forth. Okay? All right, fine. So, but you have a freedom of movement. I'm discussing this because this is a a freedom that is almost daily, on a daily basis, infringed by the authorities. And by the authorities, I mean the police. I'll give two examples. You see, when police set up roadblock and they're stopping people to check your vehicle, that's unconstitutional. The police can only stop you if they have a reasonable suspicion that you've committed an offense. Okay? So they cannot stop you to get the suspicion for the offense. They must have the suspicion for the offense
Before.
to stop you. I remember years ago, around 2000 something, I was heading into Lansapine in somebody's car. If it was my car, it would have been a different result because I wouldn't have stopped. But nevertheless, and roadblock, as you turn by the tire roundabout there and you're going in, SSU, the works. So I tell the person, I say, your car, you open up, you could do what you want. So they say, get out, I get out. I said, well, we had to search you. I said, you had to do what? I said, but you need reasons. You can't just stop me and search me like that. And one of them SSU, I said, a machine gun. He said, reasonable search me. No, have it. He ripped my shirt off my pants. I shoved his hand all around and searched me. I said, okay. I sued them. I won the case. I took a constitutional case. I know it was 50,000 I got. I don't know, a lot of money. I can't remember, it's so long ago. But the fact is, they didn't have the right to do it, and the court has ruled, yet they still do it. Yet they still do it. Just like the same thing with the passport, immigration form, yet they still do it. I tell you another yet that they still do. And this is really disconcerting because I know that the powers that be right now are fully aware of this transgression and have done nothing about it. And it is going to end up in court. So Grenada consists of Grenada, Caribbean, Martinique. How you get up in between them islands? Plane, ferry, boat.
I was going to say, drive on the bridge.
Well, yeah, the bridge coming. So, I am aware that people, now we have a ferry that takes cars. They drive, go on car and they drive. When they get to Carriacou or when they come back to Grenada or people from Carriacou coming down, police stopping people and telling them they can't leave, they want to know their license, where they live, their phone number, all kind of thing they ask them about, right? I'm in Grenada. Next thing you tell me when I leave in St. George's or going into St. David's, I had to stop.
You have to fill out your immigration
I fill out a form.
to go to
You
St.
know,
David.
they know. But I have a few badge on in there. And the government's going to pay the price because the damages that are going to be awarded by the court have to come from the public purse. And it's silly, knowing that that exists, for them to not to stop it and to condone it by inaction.
And it's funny that you're talking about that. Somebody's on the live asking a similar, the question: Is it right for individuals to be questioned and asked to present IDs when they arrive in Grenada from Carriacou?
Absolutely not. And tell them no, you're not giving them. Just tell them I'm not giving them, and let's see what happens. Just tell them you're not giving them. I encourage you to tell them that.
Nice. Is there a question from our audience? I saw some movement there.
Yeah, but it's important to talk about these things because that is so what is the word? Smacking of fascism, lack of respect for the Constitution. The preamble, we read the preamble. Does that show respect for our people? Is this how we must govern a country? By treating people? People in leadership positions don't realize they're not there to lord it over others, They're there to serve others. The police service in Trinidad is there to protect and serve. But they're not serving us, right? But we have a constitution. And the reason why this issue with Carriacou traffic has not come to the court is because, one, a lot of lawyers don't want to deal with it because they ain't gonna make no money. Two, a lot of people don't know what to do. And three, they may not have the money to take the matter to court because it is a case that should be done for free, a pro bono case, because this is what lawyers are there for, to give back, and it's part of, in my opinion, our duty to ensure that the law is upheld. The Bar Association is empowered to deal with matters like this, and they can do it, but no one's budging.
A question. Somebody on the live is asking a question, and I think I want to tweak it. I think I understand what they're trying to ask, so I'm going to tweak it for you. If it's suspected, let's say I own a piece of land in Westerhall, and I suspect that somebody is living on the land. Let's say I go abroad, and I use the example you gave. I go and study. Right? And I'm offered a job in the US, and I decide to stay and make back the money to pay for the same land I bought. Right? And I suspect, let's say I come home for Carnival, and I see, I see a property there. It has not been 12 years. Can I give the new owner, the squatter, any notice? Can I have my lawyer write them? How can I handle that situation?
Well, in my view, the best way to handle the situation is to throw them off. Trespassing carries with it the risk, and the risk is this, that the true owner of the land is entitled to the right of self-help, to use such force as reasonably necessary to get rid of you of his or her property.
Self-help.
Right? So, don't go and chop up the man or whoever, the lady or whatever it is.
Let's
there.
repeat that. Don't go chop up
Don't go use violence.
Squatter.
You know, but just knock down the house. You know, knock it down. Throw the whatever it is, throw it off.
Because it's your property.
It's absolutely, they got absolutely no rights.
So I want to interject here with that answer, going back again to the Possessory Titles Act topic. So who is to determine when the 12 years start? Because I can be confident that you're on my property. I don't care how long you were there. And as you are saying that my property is mine, so I come, I see you there, I use reasonable force to get you off my property. That person can probably now take me to court because, again, they believe that they are rightfully on this property because they have exhausted that 12 years that is required by the possessory title law. So how do we handle a situation like that? And who determines when the 12 years start?
The court, as you said, if someone is on your another person's property and they believe they've been there for over 12 years, then when you try to take them off, they could take you to court, even though you're the true owner, and the court will determine the issue. But that's not the Possessory Titles Act. Possessory Titles Act is, in the absence of the true owner, I could make an application to the court to say that it's my land based on an affidavit or affidavits. What's an affidavit? Is nothing, you know. Most affidavits I see are pack of lies. You know, because it's an affidavit doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. Okay? It doesn't, swearing a thing doesn't give it true. When people swear in the witness box in the court and they're lying through their teeth. Exactly. That's why you cross-examine to test the veracity of their evidence. Okay? So it's all about lying.
You listed something in your notes, Jennifer Gary versus Attorney General. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll do it a little bit because it's a complicated case. When the PRG, they passed a law to acquire Eric Gary's property because, you know, they threw him out, so they wanted all the properties, of which he had many. And that was declared unconstitutional, that law, because it was discriminatory. No law shall be discriminatory. And that's, I have to get the section. It was 13. Yeah, section 13, no law shall make any provision that is discriminatory either of itself or in its effect. Well, it was discriminatory because it's passed specifically just to attack Gary. Anyway, so he died, and his daughter was the executor of his estate, or the administrator. The personal representative, Jennifer, the first daughter, took the matter to court for the compensation. Okay? And the case was about forcing the government to pay. And what the government was saying, well, you know, you can't enforce judgments against the crown. The government is the crown. That's, you know, the Queen owned everything. We came through that colonial system. You can't get an order against yourself. And the Privy Council said, you're joking. This is the Constitution. Them old-time thing from England to work under this written Constitution, right? It doesn't hold water. Those concepts don't apply. And they said that neither does the concept of, we touched on this on Monday, of immunity under the Crown Proceedings Act. Anyway, I don't want to quote too many laws, we get confused. But nevertheless, there's a certain immunity from execution. That means enforcing a judgment against government property where they owe money, if you get a judgment in the court. And they said that particular provision doesn't apply because this is a constitutional right that has been infringed. And therefore, you cannot stifle the Constitution by utilizing those laws. You understand? That's how powerful. We talk about the Constitution being a living instrument that evolves as the society evolves, as situations change. And that's an example. And they said, no, we will fashion the right remedy for you because we got to give effect to the Constitution, and you can't sidestep it. So they said, in any event, the Minister of Finance is the man holding the authority down there with the money, and you can get an order against him to pay. And if he don't obey the order, he could take a prison for contempt of court. Yeah, that's the ultimate sanction. So it's a very important case on the interpretation of the Constitution and how the courts have given effect to the Constitution so that your fundamental rights are not denied by either old legislation that predated the Constitution or by fancy arguments that the government is above, almost like above the law, so to speak. Yeah.
What about the Grand Aunt's estate versus the Governor General?
Well, Grand Aunt's estate, I cited that case. So Grand Aunt's estate, a lot of it was acquired, I think, by the Gary regime, and they never paid the compensation. I mean, Gary never paid compensation. And the issue in that case was the amount of the compensation, and the question of the interest was constitutional, and the court found not, because full compensation varies, whatever the compensation, as the circumstances vary, and the interest rate will vary. So you can't have a fixed interest rate. So that was one of the points in that case.
And it's interesting because Grand Aunt's estate, some people still like to, some people probably don't even realize that what they're calling Lansopine, parts of Lansopine, am I right?
Yeah.
People are calling parts of what is Lansopine, which is actually Grand Aunt's estate.
Yeah.
Parts of it, right?
You know, they're calling parts of Grand Aunt's estate Lansopine estate.
They're calling parts of Grand Aunt's estate Lansopine,
Yeah,
right?
that's another point. Lansopine estate starts by that restaurant, junction, and breweries. Just right around there it starts.
That's where Lansopine starts.
Yeah, so the stretch going down, they say the stretch going down past the embassy, that's Grand Aunt's estate.
That's Grand Aunt's
Yeah.
estate. Great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah, that's
throw
Grand
that
Aunt's
in
estate.
there.
Yeah.
Throw that in there. Okay, so I'm reading more land questions, right? More property
Well,
questions.
it's a big thing because the land disputes are one of the most prevalent before the courts.
So The viewer is asking, can a neighbor who has a separate access road to his property use the access road or right of way of another neighbor?
Well,
And you smile because
well,
maybe that one comes up
well, yes,
quite
because
a bit.
it's understand. I'm happy to explain, and this is not a constitutional issue, but I'm happy to explain. You have a bit of land that you bought from someone, and that person gave you a right of way through their other property so you can access your property. Okay?
Okay.
You only have a right to use it because it was given to you by the person who sold it to you. The neighbor who doesn't have a right to use it, the only person who can complain is the owner of the land from whom you bought your property and who gave you the right of way, because it's his land over which he's given the right of way. Right? So unless the neighbor is blocking it and impeding your pathway and your movement, then you have no right to stop them. Yeah.
Legal question. This viewer might have to pay you a fee for that answer. Is he trying to take a neighbor to court? All right. Anything else, Mr. Bristol, you want to share on the Land Acquisition Act?
No, the Land Acquisition Act there's nothing peculiar about it, save that, in my opinion, I mean, I know the courts have ruled that the Constitution said the Act must provide for prompt payment of full compensation. And I think the Court of Appeal has held that the Act does provide for prompt payment, but it doesn't provide for prompt payment because you have to set up a tribunal and you have to have a judge, a sitting judge as the chairperson of the tribunal and all of that. And I could tell you, I've been trying to get a tribunal set up since before COVID, well before COVID, and we can't get it done. So how does that act provide for prompt payment when you can't even get to the assessment, much less the payment? Mm-hmm. So it may set up a mechanism, but then the time frames are probably too long and not rigid enough. I don't think that it provides for prompt payment. I think it in practice it doesn't work, and I think there's enough probably meat on the bone now to go back to court and with sufficient evidence to show that it doesn't work. I mean, we have Point Saline Airport property, still people haven't been paid. We have Hog Island. Where's the prompt payment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have land, there compensation are trying to get. Me, I can't get it. I was Attorney General. I knew all the following Attorney General, and I can't get any headway. So what about the layperson? You know what I mean? That the courts have to help out to enforce the Constitution. And I think it's time for us to challenge it again.
You mentioned something earlier. I just want clarity on it. Fair trial rights. Could you explain that again?
Okay. There are two sections doing with fair trial rights. Well, let's do the civil one, with which I'm more familiar. All right, yeah. Section 8(1) of the Constitution. If any person is charged with a criminal offense, then, unless the charge is withdrawn, the case shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial court established by law. Right. Fair hearing means, and is being interpreted thus, it starts the whole process from the time of arrest. It's all part of the process. You're coming right through. But at the preliminary hearing, if it's an offense above, or even at a summary offense in the magistrate's court, you have to, apart from telling them the charges and so forth, you have to provide all the statements for all the witnesses who are against him, the prosecution witnesses. That's part of it. Then so that's part of the fairness. And part of the fairness, well, it says reasonable time, but that's also part of the fairness. You know, part of the fairness, in my view, is having decent courts. Yeah? Which we haven't had since before Hurricane Ivan. That's part of the fairness. Part of the fairness is having not being on remand, having the trial at a reasonable time for several years while you're waiting for your trial your case to come up. So, and then for civil, Section 8(8), similar. It says any court, other authority prescribed by law for the determination of the existence or the extent of any civil right or obligation shall be established by law and shall be independent and impartial. I'll come to that. And where the proceedings for such determination are instituted by any person before such a court or other authority, the case shall be given a fair hearing within a reasonable time. And it's an impartial court. That is why the judiciary, there are separate provisions in the Constitution for the appointment of judges, their salaries, their holidays, all them things are provided for by what is called the court's order, which is part of the Constitution. So they're insulated from the political fray, so to speak. Okay? You can't influence them and so on. All right?
Thank you. We do have a question from one of our audience members.
Good evening. Good evening to you. Council, recently in Grenada, perhaps even continuing, there's been a lot of excitement surrounding the data protection bill. I don't know that it's an act yet. But
Which bill is that?
data
Data.
protection.
It just came out. I got the Gazette. I
It's
got the
now an
Gazette
act.
today.
It's new.
Right.
Yes.
And I know there were expressions of concern and so on about the constitutionality of that in relation to specific provisions in the Bill of Rights. So I want to put it broadly. What comments will you offer on that issue broadly in relation to any specific provisions in the Bill of Rights?
Well, the truth is, I read when it was being circulated very late in the day after it was approved, I think. I think it was sent round for consultation after the consultation meant nothing. Too late. And I did make a comment to the Attorney General, but I can't recall. That was some time ago. And it only came across my desk today, so I haven't studied it. But I did raise a couple of concerns. But it's something that, because it's so wide-ranging, it is something that requires a discussion all on its own, I would like to think. And maybe, not me, but you could get other people as well to come along and have a little presentation on the Data Protection Act, and maybe have a panel of people to have a discussion, because if you just bring me, first you get one point of view, but if you bring other people, you get different opinions,
It's true.
and don't have to be all lawyers,
It's true.
and get a feel for it,
Trying to see if we have another question. I'm not sure. Do we have another question from our audience? I thought I saw movement. They're moving. We're trying to move them. They're moving for the right words to ask that question, and we don't have anything online at the moment. So I don't know. There was another case that I saw in your notes that I wanted you to explain. This one is a bit hard to pronounce.
Well, that's a case on the right to a passport, which we discussed on Monday. It's a case from India. What one finds very helpful, because they're all we have the same system of law, so you can refer to Australia, India, South Africa, Canada, US, and on bills of rights in particular, you can refer to the European Court, because it's basically the same constitution. But so that case was discussing the right to a passport, and the Supreme Court there was saying that it's part and parcel of your freedom of movement right, and you can't deny a citizen a passport. Yeah, and it doesn't belong to the state; it belongs to the citizen. So it's something but I'll give you another example of something that's a hot potato, and a lot of people may not realize. Some busybody in government, and we have a lot of them, because a lot of the problems are just a few individuals causing them, in my view and my experience. I think the Carriacou issue with the boat, I think, is an individual causing that. And I think this problem came up from some individual, I don't know, they must have taken, I'm a Christian, but they must have taken some of those things a bit right-wing, and distorting what what the book really says. So they decided that to go into any government building, you have to have a dress code.
That's a big one.
Now, that is the most unconstitutional thing I have ever come across. And no one's challenged it. I did all the research, and I have it sitting down on my computer. Okay? You are telling me that I do have the freedom of movement in my country to go to a government office to do business with the government because I am, for example, too poor to afford a shirt without holes or a shirt that doesn't have a sleeve. I may be perfectly well dressed. I was with a senior director of one of the largest Caribbean companies going into the Ministry of Finance some years ago, and this person was dressed as a lady, high professional. But because the dress top was, you say, you can't come. I said, who are you talking to? You know, because when I did the wrong person, they cross. I said, no, let's go. And I just walked in. But they do that.
It's a big one.
And intimidate, you know, you can't wear a pair of shorts. I can't wear a pair of shorts. What's wrong? We live in the tropics. In Bermuda, you go to court as a lawyer in shorts. So what is this nonsense? Okay?
But it's funny because they would do that for a woman, and they would accept. And I've witnessed this, and I've been detained because of things like that, right? And you would see the next person after you is a gentleman who is wearing flip-flops, and his pants is below his buttocks. But that person could come in because that person is wearing his pants long, yeah. But because I'm not wearing that, so you see that a lot, and I think that's a big one. I'm happy you touched on that.
Well, that's just discriminatory treatment too, on top of the unconstitutionality of this requirement. You know, dress decently. I think it's indecent. These people these fellas, I'm going to call them, I'm going to give them the accolade of any greater noun than that, who insist on wearing their trousers so their bottoms are out. That's indecent. And you're not coming in to no government office dressing decently. Right? Now, I was in the magistrate court some years ago, and a gentleman I was represented on some traffic matter or something. He wears his shirt outside his trousers. The police scruff up the man. Well, you know, suppose, so you tell me, let us say a poor person is arrested, they pick up a vagrant on the street and they bring him to court. They go tell him, before you can come into court to defend yourself, you come to defend yourself, you better get dressed, otherwise you can't defend yourself. Come on, you talk nonsense. And so much so that last year or year before, there was a similar practice in Barbados. And a letter came from, I think it was the Attorney General, I'm not sure, but nevertheless, I got a copy of it, saying that practice has to stop. And they sent out a directive. I took that letter and I sent it to the authorities here. Nothing stopped. Because that fascist person who made up this rule, and I hope they're listening, you know? I hope they're listening. Well, I wish they would come here and let's have a chat. You know, I don't like people like that because they're doing wrong things to our people. Okay, they're playing big and harassing us and subjugating us and making up laws. The same one with the telephone number and the immigration form is another one I want to deal with.
They do this same thing at hospitals. They do it there's this office where you go to get your police record. And mind you, the police record is a piece of, I don't know the exact measurement of the paper. It's not even a full sheet of paper. It's a little square with a picture that you take, and it's handwritten. But you must wear sleeve to collect this piece of paper.
That's hogwash.
Yeah.
That's absolute hogwash.
I want to ask you personally, can you send me a note so I can going to these government
But
ministries.
I don't know if my note will do anything. You know, even when we take them to court, they don't understand. But when there's an appeal being made to the authorities, and right, authorities, it starts from the Prime Minister down, 'cause they run the country, and they can issue directives to the police, to the people in the departments, and so forth. When they don't do that, they don't listen to reason. They close their ears and their eyes to any comment, any suggestion, which either appears unimportant to them or with which they don't agree. Then you're going down a really rocky road, and it's going to end in problems. Because once you do it for small things like this, it'll get down to the big things, and then when you get the revo in your tail, you go wonder where it came from. Gary started off helping farmers, and look at what happened. You understand?
When they
He
feel
he destroyed the country.
when they feel the weight of the river, they're going to understand.
Well, then you had the revo, and as a result of what he did, it didn't just happen like that. It was years being built up, So this is what I'm not saying we're going to have a revo, but I'm saying you're going to get a disgruntled populace.
True.
And you want people to be happy. Why don't we change our attitude and adhere to what's in here? And just treat people fairly. It's very simple.
There's a great question on the live that I want to pose at this time. The viewer is asking. She says, "I'm currently involved in a possessory matter. I received the property as a deed of gift, but when I tried to do business with the land, I was told there was no clear root ownership of the land. They did not know how my great-grandmother, I guess that's who she got the land from, came to own the land. She died in 1972, so she would have had possession before then. Do we really need to do a possessory? I have a deed plan and everything."
No, well, you have a deed and plan, but it means nothing. Anybody can make up a deed and a plan. The question is, what's the quality of it? Okay, a deed of gift is not of itself evidence of a title. You have to go back for at least 30 years to find where the title started, and the title will start either by another deed where the person who gave it to you by the gift bought for money, or whereby that property was mortgaged. It's got to be some consideration, some passing to when that deed was that property was first transferred to the person who gave it to you more than 30 years, or at least 30 years ago. It used to be 60, it's now 30. So, yes, you can't do anything unless you could find your grandmother's. And then there's only hearsay that your grandmother was there. Who said,
Maybe she can squat on the land for 12 years and then
Yeah, but
and then own it.
well, you could get, if you're on it, even after receiving the deed of gift, and you had been there 12 years, you can apply under the Possessory Titles Act. Right?
But I mean, she did say that she tried to do business. I guess she tried to do business.
She tried to borrow. I come across these things every day. I came across one today where these statutory declarations and deeds of gift come up, and they're not really sufficient. You need more than that.
Okay.
And you can go on the Possessory Titles Act, but as I said, I think that act is flawed, and from a constitutional point of view, it doesn't stop you going because it's on the books.
So even if you have the deed, even if you have the information, that's a tough one.
But it's not a deed. Well, it's a deed, but it's you have to look at the quality of the deed, because I could say I'm going to give you a deed for a piece of land just going down the airport here, but I don't own it. But I'll give you a deed, but it doesn't mean you get it, because I can only give you what I own.
So because of the quality of it, maybe the great grandmother didn't actually own it.
Well, there's no proof that she owned it.
Okay, so she needs proof
Absolutely.
of ownership.
And you have to look for a deed where the great grandmother got it. So they have to dig in the registry and look for it.
So proof of ownership. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a tough one. So I mean, my best advice is to squat on it and then go fight for it. 12 years. 12 years of squatting, you know? That's a nice title for a film.
Yeah, well,
12 years
that
of
could only be
squatting.
under the Possessory Titles Act because
Under the Possessory Titles Act,
yeah,
yes. Okay.
and the act
That's
is
a
in force, and
very interesting one, though.
yeah,
Gift, and it's called what it's actually a gift of deed. That's
a
what
deed
it's
of
called.
gift.
A deed
But
of
yeah,
gift.
because you can give someone anything. Yeah, I can give you a book. I can give you this bottle of water. I can give you my car. You know, a chair.
All right, so let's do that right now. I have a blank sheet of paper.
But you don't need a bit of paper. I can say, hey, the paper may be evidence.
No,
but you don't need paper to show a gift. For land,
the land I was referring to.
yeah, for land you require a deed.
So we'll talk
but-
after the program about
but
the deed.
The quality of the deed is another matter. Otherwise, people will just be making up deeds. I mean, there are lots of made up deeds. That's why you do checks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess this is what the viewer is going through right now. I guess
Absolutely,
they're
I see it
doing
all
checks.
the time. It may
They-
be my firm who told her that. That's probably why she's calling.
Ooh la la. Listen, they have two invoices now they have to send to you. Yeah? Well, you have to send them your invoice. All right. I see more movements. I'm not sure if we have another question. I'm going to open up the floor again to see if we have another question. And this evening we're talking about human rights, we're talking about land acquisition, we're talking about the Police Act. And I want to thank all our viewers online, and I want to encourage you to continue sharing the live. And I know there's a lot happening this week, so I know some of our viewers will go back and look at this broadcast. And I just want to thank you for tuning in. This is a very important discussion. We're talking about Constitution, and this is part 2. On Monday, we opened up with what is Constitution. We talked about Parliament, and this is continuation, and it is part 2. I know a lot of you are saying this is an excellent program. We thank you for all your good energy, and maybe if we have sponsorship for more programs like this. So if you're listening and you want to sponsor more programs like these, just let us know, and we'll definitely facilitate your requests.
Yeah, the whole rights thing is it's really important because if a government can get away with what, or governments can get away with what they do get away with a Bill of Rights, you can imagine if we didn't have one, and it is. I think they need strengthening. We could strengthen them, but I don't think we've exhausted the provisions that already exist. We need, for example, if we don't have a good and accessible court system that is reasonably, that's financially accessible to the public, that's physically accessible to the public, that is administratively accessible to the public, with representation that is also affordable. Many of the rights cannot be vindicated before the court because you just can't get there, So it is, and what has happened, and we're supposed to have impartial courts established, trial within a reasonable time. The court system has been starved of investment throughout the Caribbean, and it's not just the Caribbean, it's even England. Their court system is collapsing because the government don't like the courts, because the courts are independent, and when they try tricks and the judges rule against them, they don't like it. We have had situations here where judges' progression through the system has been stymied by particular government who didn't like their decisions, for example. Okay? So we really need governments with integrity who understand and respect the Constitution. And I think that would be really wonderful if one day we get it to that utopian ideal where governments actually want to do what is right. And I hope we get there, because otherwise we're just wasting our time,
There are two more questions on the live. One of them you already touched on Monday, were the COVID regulations, which restricted movement of people and confined them to their homes, legal or unconstitutional. I know we touched on that, but if you just do a quick review.
Yeah. If the particular regulations were under the Public Health Act or the Quarantine Act, I think they would have been okay. But if they were under the Emergency Powers Act, I say definitely they were not okay.
Right.
I mean that. I mean they're not valid and they're unconstitutional.
Emergency Powers Act. So this viewer should go back and review that act and
Well, the declaration of the state of emergency, in my view, was outside the ambit of the act. So that declaration is null and void. And
especially when we had no cases at one point, right?
No, because it didn't fall within the parameters of the law. The law says you need a action by a person or group of persons that's threatening the state. There was no action. It was just, it was a disease. And it's funny, the Constitution provides under Section 3. Section 3 exception on the freedom of personal liberty, a law which provides for the purpose of preventing the spread of infectious or contagious disease is an exception. So we have the Public Health Act, I think that does it, and the Quarantine Act. But certainly, the declaration of the state of emergency, in my view, and I told the then Attorney General that, but it was politically expedient to carry on with it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at a few more questions coming in on the live. And somebody's asking, can someone put someone on somebody's land without their permission? I mean, that one is...
Can someone put well, anybody can go on anyone's land. When they find out that you're there, they can throw you off.
Is a thief. As a thief, right?
Well, as a squatter, really.
And then there's another question. How did the Constitution become a constitution? Has the Chief Justice ever made rules to govern its procedures? Has it ever been relied upon?
Well, the Constitution, the most of the constitutions emanate from the UN Declaration of Human Rights after World War II, when the whole world was striving for peace. So that's why they're all quite similar. And we got our constitution in 1974 from the British government. Well, we had some input because there's some parts of that which are peculiar to Grenada. But the general framework, and that was part of our independence, this constitution, which is why a lot of people say, well, it's not really ours because we didn't draft it and, we should have our own. Fair enough, I guess. But that's where it came from.
I think general education, educating yourselves, I'm speaking to viewers and, anybody, educate yourself, go read the Constitution. There's so much that you can learn, and even in the preamble, it sets the tone for.
Yeah, the preamble is really the easiest bit to read. Otherwise, it's pretty confusing. I think we should be doing more programs. I think it should be taught in school, not in any depth, just so that people are aware. I didn't know anything about a Constitution until I became a lawyer and came back to Grenada. Imagine that. I didn't know anything. Nothing, zero. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to, education is too narrow in my view. We're going on to another topic, but I think the kind of education we have is teaching people to pass exams. Mm-hmm. In my day, you had 6 O-levels, you have brain. Nowadays, you have 14 and you pass them one time. Well, what kind of exam that could be? 3 A-levels were like Island Scholar. 3 A-levels, you got Island Scholar with 3 A-levels. So, the education is much more than passing exams, and I think we need to broaden the curriculum and include things such as this, include general knowledge of the society in which you live, not just the Constitution, but everything. Your country, your heritage, the history, the true history of our country. We should be teaching these things.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely agree with you. It should be taught in schools, from a very early age. From primary school, you should, start learning about the Constitution. Shouldn't wait
Yeah.
until, because I feel like they push everything in secondary school and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are many things we used to learn in primary school. We did biology in primary school. I don't know what they do now, but certainly, and I left primary school at 10. So I was doing that before.
There's a question here. I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly, but what's something about the 101 of the Constitution?
Oh, 101. Yeah.
And I want to thank you for that question. And Mr. Bristol will do his very best to answer those questions for you. And after that, there's one more question, and we can wrap up.
Yeah. 101 is the right to apply to the court if any part of the Constitution in respect of you has been infringed, except for Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights is you go to the court under Section 16, but 101 deals with any other section. For example, public service falls under the other sections. If you're a public servant and the procedures in the Constitution haven't been followed, if you're not properly appointed via the public service, a lot of public servants are not really appointed by the Public Service Commission. So you could have things like that. Also, citizenship is set out there. Pensions, the people who are being told that they have to apply for citizenship when they're actually citizens on birth, because if your mother, either parent is born here and you're born in Timbuktu, the day you were born, you're a Grenadian citizen. You don't have to apply, but they've been telling people, again, somebody up in, maybe the same person who tell you how to wear clothes, tell them do that. Yeah? Which is amazing, because when I was Attorney General, I straightened all of it out. No sooner had I gone, it started to come back. All of it was straight. 100%. So some people just like to create trouble. Right? And I wish that person will stand up and be counted.
All right, and somebody's asking I want to reference bullet F of the preamble, which gives two directives, the Constitution. So the first one, to reflect the ideals and beliefs of the people, and two, to make provisions for the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms.
Well, F is predicated on A to E, because it says desire that the Constitution should reflect the above-mentioned principles. So it should reflect the above-mentioned, which are set out in A. It's too long to read, and those principles represent. We are acknowledging as a country that those principles and beliefs represent the high ideals. This is the top of the top. This is what we should aspire to. This is how we should be running our country, upon which the nation is founded. There we go. And make provision for ensuring the protection in Grenada of fundamental rights and freedoms. We've got to aim for those high ideals, because that's the foundation of the country. Do we do it? Do you see it every day? I don't. I really don't. There's too much tinkering with the Constitution. There's too much sidestepping or attempts to sidestep the provisions of the Constitution. And I don't see why. It just baffles me. I just don't understand it. Why we just don't want to follow the rule, It's if everybody ignored the rules, we'll have anarchy. So why the rules are put there for a purpose, especially the Constitution, because that's the highest law.
Final thoughts, Mr. Bristol. It's been 2 nights of discussion on the Constitution of Grenada, and it's been a very fruitful conversation. And I want to thank you again for just the opportunity to be in your space and to learn from you. And I know the people on the live are learning a lot. A lot of them are expressing how grateful they are for such a program. And I just want to, just thank you again, and just final thoughts, and leave us with something profound, as you usually.
Well, the
do.
first thing is, I'm humbled by the invitation, because I'm not a constitutional expert. And if I were, I'll still be humbled by the invitation, because I think it's our duty. One is recognizing that I have something to offer, and I'm grateful for that. And secondly, it's our duty to help. And, I could be in many places, but I think it's my duty to help. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to use my God-given gifts to help. And that's just what it is. My view is that every government, when I say every government, every political party in power, that's what we mean by the government, ought to have a truly independent attorney general. When I say truly independent from the point of view, not that you can't be part of the party, but independent from the point of view that they are free. They have the freedom, the free reign to give true and real and proper legal advice without fear that they're going to be victimized because of it. This is what we need, because a lot of people in government don't know the rules. But it's the duty of the Attorney General, who's a principal legal advisor to the government, to correct the government and advise on legal matters. And I think we need a very, very strong Attorney General, and we need the government to respect the office of the Attorney General, which is, in my view, one of the most, probably, if not the most important office in any government. Because if you don't, everything is governed. Everything in life is rule and regulation. Every single thing. You can't get away from rules and regulations within government and outside government. And if we do not follow them, we're in problems. And we need to be able to have proper advice, properly considered advice. It may not always be the right thing, but at least it's properly considered, going out to the government and the government departments and saying, this is what you should be doing, and it's strong advice. And that the powers that be indicate to their departments that when the Attorney General gives the advice, you follow. That's really important. And I'd like to see that. I'll feel really great if that happens.
Thank you. What was your final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
Nice.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then we're going to wrap up our program for this evening, Constitution Nights, presented by Grenada Credit Unions.
Sorry, but it's not a question. I really have come to, on behalf of Grenada Credit Unions, to say thanks to Council for his selfless giving to assist us all in understanding a few important things, or a number of important things about the Constitution and other aspects of law in Grenada. Now, people would know that credit unions are very popular and strong throughout Grenada. It means that our members constitute a significant section of the population. So it's very important for us to message to our members, and in doing so to message to the public on matters of national importance. And so we are now in a space and in a time where we are talking many things, among them transformation. But we need to settle the foundation. That's where we find ourselves. Before we thrust off, we need to stabilize, consolidate, and settle the foundation. And so the labor that we must put in at this point, I believe, must focus on a lot of that. Dedicate ourselves to assisting citizens to understand. It's not for certification purposes. It's for understanding, enlightenment. All right? People should not be in a situation where there's a secret being held somewhere in a lawyer's office. Mm-hmm. And you believe as a citizen that, well, I this and that, until you walk into that office one day And you say, well, and the lawyer says, no, you can't have no standing here, you can't do this, you can't do that. So there's some elementary things that people, I believe, the society is entitled to know, meaning to be educated on, to be informed about. And so, having listened, I kept thinking that our people should, meaning my organization, should really invite the authorities to give some consideration to providing this basic supply of information to the public. And all these modern platforms that they use, Mikey Live and Twitter and who. I don't know what goes where. But, but the platforms are available. So if you're young and you listen to it on Mikey Live or you listen to it on Facebook, wherever, the platforms are there. We need to input the information so that the citizens across the board are enlightened, are informed, and are able now to understand. But that's our big problem in society. We don't understand so much of what we need to understand. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Bristol, and you, our moderator. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mikey, and your crew, and thanks to everybody who's contributed. I trust we have all learned a lot. I won't tell you how much we paid Mr. Bristol. He's such a kind man. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I just want to wrap up once again. This has been Constitution Nights, sponsored by Grenada Credit Unions. This has been an amazing 2 days filled with education on the Constitution. And I want to thank Mr. Bristol. Thank you so much for your selfless contribution towards this important topic and important discourse. So thank you, and thank you for tuning in. This has been, once again, Constitution Nights, sponsored by Grenada Credit Unions. Have a good evening.